So today on the podcast, we have Mr. Blake Ewing. Blake is the concept designer behind Sonespheres 1 through 4, film composer, and musical extraordinaire. So I wanted to start, I was looking at your website, and you say, by historical standards, I suppose I was a latecomer to the world of music. At 16, I taught myself to play the piano by reading an old set of world book encyclopedias. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me. It's
Of
awesome to
course.
hang out with you
Yeah,
guys.
thanks for coming on.
Yeah. So I never really, when growing up, I never like took lessons or anything like that, when I was a kid. I don't really remember music being a super important part of, like family life or anything like some people have when they're growing up. But I think my mom like bought a used piano maybe or something we had around the house, and it was just sitting there. So I kind of got curious about, like what's this do?
Absolutely.
And so we had, like a lot of people back then, this would have been, I guess, early 90s. We had a set of encyclopedias. So I just like went to the piece and looked up piano and kind of was trying to figure out, what do the white keys do? What are the black keys for? And, that just kind of led me to, what's a scale? What are the key, what are the musical keys? And yeah, so it just kind of went from there. Like one article would lead me to another. It was like the pre-internet rabbit hole, basically.
That's fantastic. I remember when I was a kid reading encyclopedias and being fascinated by them, and that's pre-internet. So it's like
Yeah.
that all the knowledge that we had was in the
Yeah.
next update of encyclopedias.
It was kind of like, now you would go to YouTube,
Yeah.
Wikipedia.
do what I was doing, with the physical book. But I mean, it was the same principle, just trying to find a how-to, to approach this instrument that's now in your living room.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of where it kicked off and I think, yeah, I was about 16, I guess, when that happened.
Okay. So you taught yourself to play piano, and then it looks like you started writing. You kind of learned to write some music, and then what was the next step? How did you get to composing for media?
Well, yeah, like as soon as I started to kind of be able to make a tune, with the keyboard, I guess I wasn't super interested in playing other people's music. From the start, I was more interested in sort of creating my own melodies and trying to learn how to write them down. So in a way, I guess learning the piano was kind of just the method to get me to be, being able to kind of get the ideas onto some form of paper.
Yeah.
So yeah, the next step, I guess, I don't know. I remember seeing the movie Apollo 13. You guys remember that movie?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what year that was. I guess it was maybe like 95 or something. And I was in the theater, and before this, I had never really paid attention to, there's a soundtrack here, with the exception of maybe like Star Wars or something. And I just remember being very moved by the music of that movie and thinking, wow, that's something people actually write, and that's their job. So I guess that was kind of the spark that led to that being an interest. There's playing a piano and writing a melody or writing a song. But then there's also this other dimension of contributing that music to a larger art form, film and just visual media in general. And so, that, I guess that was kind of the start of me being interested in that whole side of things.
That's awesome. We were just talking last episode about how I had a very similar experience with Avatar. So both movies are James Horner.
Yeah.
So he's a great composer.
All over the place back in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it clicks, like there's that certain time where you kind of have that click moment of, oh, people do this for a living.
Yeah, and that, I guess that wasn't even the first thought. The first thought for me was just like on like an emotional level, like, wow, this is really moving, like, and with the imagery, there's just something about that, to me at least, that it's hard to replicate with either by themselves, with just the visual or just the music. But when you put them together, there's just something magical about that sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
When it works, it like really, really works.
That's how I feel about the Joker score, because when I was listening to some of the tracks that they put out before I saw the movie, I was like, oh, okay, this sounds pretty dark and moody. But then once I saw the movie and heard the music, I was just like completely drawn in. And then going back and listening to the score by itself, it almost makes you now appreciate it, because sort of like what scenes were going on when you hear the music, and it really kind of like makes sense. So it was like at first out of context was like, this sounds cool, but all right, I'll wait and see it with the movie. And then once you see it, it's just like everything just like, then you can appreciate it more
Right.
sort of on its own. But yeah.
The same thing with the same composer. It's Hildur Gudnadóttir, I think is how you say her name. But she did Chernobyl. I don't know. Did you guys watch that series?
HBO, yeah.
Same thing. The music there was just absolutely haunting, and almost more of a sound design than a more traditional melodic score. But like when you put it with the visuals, it was just amazing.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was powerful. So, who are some artists that inspired you and helped shape your style?
Oh, I guess like James Horner probably would have been one early on.
Totally.
Since that was kind of my introduction to that style of music. But I think, probably I am more maybe influenced by more classical musicians than soundtrack composers.
Yeah, and it can be radio hits too, like pop, top 40.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I try not to listen to music that is similar to what I write, just because I don't want to accidentally, kind of mimic someone else's music.
Sure.
But yeah, I find inspiration all over the place, from R&B to like we kind of talked a little bit before we started about classic rock and things. And I just like anyone that is kind of pushing the boundaries of whatever it is they're doing. I like the idea of genre bending music, that doesn't fit neatly necessarily into one genre or another. But yeah, I guess initially classical composers like Aaron Copland, Ravel, Debussy, the Impressionistic, those guys were
Absolutely,
really influential on me. I was a kind of a choir nerd in late high school and college. So, Duraflay and Morton Lauridsen, those types of guys, their harmonies and just the way they approached, the harmonic structure of the music, I think influenced a lot of the way, the ways that I write, and they sort of tapping into the emotions they tapped into, I think is something that kind of inspired the way that I write things.
Absolutely. I can hear that for sure. And like the way they use tension between like half steps and things like that, dissonant chords that resolve, I can definitely hear it.
Yeah. What's an artist who you like, if you were to say like an artist who really sort of like made you change into going into the style that you do now, who would you say is probably like the biggest influence that really sort of like took you down the path of like sort of what you're doing now?
Oh, I don't know, because I've never, I don't think it was like in a way I wasn't starting off, as a rock musician and then sort of transition to this. I mean, I think this is kind of just who I've been the whole time. So I guess it would be the same people I just named, in a way, because that's, I mean, my music, I hope has evolved since I started, but I don't think there was any like one particular person in the midst of me already creating that I was just like, oh, well, I think I want to do that now. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess just those same classical guys that kind of inspired me to begin with, maybe as I go along, I just try to get better and better at that craft, and maybe it translates into something that sounds maybe a bit different, but in my mind, it's just an evolution of that same goal.
Yeah. Is piano still your primary?
Yeah, I dabble with guitar. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination a guitarist, but I love texture, which I guess you guys can tell from the libraries, and if you've heard any of my music, that's a big part of it. And so there's something magical about textures that you can get with a guitar that you can't really get with a piano.
They are different, yeah.
In its natural state. So yeah, I dabble with that. But yeah, usually like when it comes to writing new music, usually it starts at the piano, unless it starts with just like a texture, or just an inspiring sound like a pad or something, But yeah, if it's melodic, it usually starts with the piano.
When did you start getting into sound design and starting to sort of like take organic instruments and modify them in a way that, that maybe you weren't hearing in other libraries? Or like, what point was it that you sort of started doing that, like kind of mangling organic sounds?
I don't know. I think within the last like maybe 10 years, I started getting more interested in just the sonic textures that you can make from existing material, whether that's something you've recorded or, you know, a sample or whatever. And I don't know how that happened or why it happened. There's just something about sound in general that like really interests me. You know, I'm kind of always on the listen for interesting sounds. And are you guys into ASMR? Have you heard of that at all?
I'm
Yeah,
familiar
yeah,
with it.
yeah. Familiar
So
with
like
it.
I'm highly affected by that, you know, whatever that is in the brain that triggers that feeling in, you know, physically. And so I don't know if that has any relation to me being interested in texture or whatever, but I feel like it kind of, you know, would make sense if it did. But yeah, I don't know, Craig, why or how I started that. I just I think it was just kind of it was like the natural step to just, you know, like let's say you've played the same 5 notes over and over, and now you want to learn some new notes. And I think that was kind of
Yeah.
my idea.
Oh, I think there's something that's like a fun thing, like when you started getting into audio or audio production and like learning how to recording just like a guitar track, and then just wanting to like, oh, you know, then you start getting into like EQing and processing it, and then you get to the point where you start like really wanting to take stuff forward, or like stretching out samples, reversing samples, processing them, and then, you know, so it's like it's really, it's a really fun process, I think, to see how far you can take sounds. And like with the Sonespheres 4 stuff that that we just released, like it's probably my favorite. I love all of them, but I think that's the one that like so many of those sounds just like you just start getting ideas from it. Like I
Yeah.
really wanted to like pick your brain as far as like your approach with this one. I'd really like to talk with you about the whole series and sort of like where you wanted to go with it. But for Sonespheres 4, what was the intention behind the library, and what you wanted to do with it, with this series in particular?
Um, Let me just take a step back because I was just thinking of an analogy. Like, you know how if you're like, say, a world famous chef, or like, you know, maybe you run a bakery. Well, you get sick of the thing that you make all the time, right? The sweetness of the baked goods or whatever. And I think the more you get into an art form, the more you want to push it outside of that sort of pretty boundary. You know what I mean? Like the melodies that you write when you first start are like, you know, very syrupy and like Leah's theme from Star Wars or something, you know. But like the more you get into it, you want to get deeper and deeper. And like I really love dissonance. Like I just think there's a beauty in that you can't get from, you know, just a simple melody. I mean, I love simple melodies too, but like you know, it's a spice that you can grab and use that maybe you didn't even know about when you first started. And so I think that kind of ties into my approach to sound design is to sort of push those limits a little bit into territory that may not even be comfortable at first, but is outside of your normal boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
lead to, you know, really, really wonderful discoveries. So anyway, that's a little off topic, I guess, as far as Sonespheres 4. But
Real quick, Mike's ready to come in.
Bring him in.
hey Mike,
Hi, Blake.
how are you?
It's good to finally see you.
Yeah. We've talked a few times, but I don't think we've ever video chatted from the future like this.
Yeah. Now we are in the future.
So we were just talking about the ideas behind Sonespheres, spreading your wings a little bit on the sound design and kind of stretching the boundaries of what you do. And he was telling us all about Sonespheres 4 and some analogies of baking the same thing over and over and how it gets boring, so you try to do something else. We're definitely craftsmen. I think of myself as a craftsman more than an artist, so it makes perfect sense.
I mean, I think of it this way because, like, this is how we approach all of our instruments, I think, in a grand sense. So if you say you have a toolbox in your garage, you know what the worst thing in the fucking world is? When you have 10 of the same screwdriver, but not any of the one you need. Or like, you know, when you get those little Allen wrenches from IKEA and you got 50 of them, but you need the size just one smaller than that, and it's in the same pile. So I think what's excellent about this fourth Sonespheres is that there are a lot you can do with pads. You can even make them very percussive and pulsy by shaping the ADSR in the user interface. But what we really need is things that have definition and edge and kind of bite to them, or quasi percussive aspects or absolutely percussive aspects. And so I think what's great about 4 is it keeps the same kind of dreamy atmospheric feeling, but provides the tools to finish the compositions that you can kind of shape with the earlier Sonespheres. I mean, I think it's always been our ideal to make every library be fully self-contained. So you could create a full composition by using nothing but it. Because I think that's kind of the idea, is that like, if I only have $50 to spend on a library, if I'm looking for a new piece of inspiration, I want everything I can get out of that investment. And I want it to be useful in a lot of different ways forever, not just the one trick pony I might need it for. So I think that's what this library is really bringing to the Sonespheres collection, is to round it out, to allow those other elements that allow definition in a composition, to bring all of it together and to tie it into one piece.
Yeah, and I think of each volume as like a different toolkit or a different box of colored pencils. It's like, oh, I'm grabbing this box of colored pencils because I want to use these colors today.
In regards to the field kits, what were you recording for that? Like, what made you want to record that set of sounds as far as adding that percussive element to the library?
Yeah, I love and in a lot of my songs I use a lot of little ticky sounds, that just kind of help move the rhythm along.
Mhm.
And a lot of times you can hear them, but they're not, the focus. They're just there to kind of help with the feeling. And so I thought it would be cool to like make those from field recordings, of like walking through a Japanese tea garden, or visiting a space and rocket center, just something that's kind of out of left field, but maybe there's a story there, or just interesting sounds. And Mike, I know you guys have done a lot of this. I'm thinking like your Glass Beach library and things like that, where you take just recording and make them into an instrument that you never would have imagined they could be. And I don't know, there's something really cool about that, I think. And I thought, with a sound like that, I guess it's just much easier to make them a percussive instrument than anything else. So that's kind of where the idea came from.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most innate impulse of somebody who's into sound, whether they're a kid or an adult, when they first start kind of realizing that they're fascinated by it, is when you just knock on something that like a metal handrail as you're walking down the stairs or something, and you realize how musical it is, and then you hit the next one and it's a different note, and you're almost impelled maybe to run back and forth and play a little melody.
Take a stick.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially the lamellophone is that most innate concept of a playable object or part of the world. I mean, people used to do it with logs and trees and rocks, or anything that could resonate. I mean, that's really that, and wind through reeds and our own voices and birds are what pulled us to music from just them being, simple communication tools. And I'm sure in that way, music probably helped create the concept of language that we know now, over kind of a coevolution of the two.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's just my sense of it. But what I think about, like what you said, when you're in a space center and you think that, I mean, sure, if you hear some interesting, I don't know, piece of machinery that's running in the background and you record it, yes, you could find in theory a machine that sounds similar to that somewhere else. But somehow that's not what it is that you're capturing entirely. It's the why and the where and the how.
Yeah.
It's the whole ghost of the moment and the place and the time and you and the people there, and you're capturing a piece of time and space, and you're and in the only, I mean video in a way can capture it, but not so. I mean, with sound you're capturing the kinetic moment, not just the photons, but all of the energy in a sense, in its interactions with the environment, as much as we can at least, and giving a person the ability to put themselves there as best we can. So I think, yeah, when you take source recordings from a location, like an adventure that you go on, it also shapes what you do with the sound afterward too, the sound design or how you present it. And I think in a way, that's why where sound is recorded matters. That's why a place like a piano in a church isn't just a piano in a church. It's one thing. Or like the reason every pipe organ is special is because the whole building is the instrument. And in the same way, when you're doing field recordings as a basis to create an instrument, in that sense, you're trying to create an instrument that is a playable moment, a feeling, an aesthetic. And I mean, the entire Sonespheres series has really been about that. Is about just taking pure textural aesthetics or instruments and like the most intense form of them, like recording a piano in such a thuddy, noisy way where it feels like you're the hammer, you're the felt. That's that feeling of like the intensity that you can't even experience in real life. There's no way to physically get down and play a piano while your head's also on the hammer, on at the hammers to feel like that's the point of aesthetic recording and sampling. Okay, now everybody sampled all the basic instruments, but they haven't sampled the feelings that really people are trying to get at when they do create, when they do compose. They're not just looking for a piano to play this. I mean, that's, I guess, the old paradigm. Like, here's my strings, here's my brass, here's my voice. Here's what we're getting at now is like that's not what we're chasing in music. We're chasing deeper feelings than just simply mathematical representations of form and function. We're aiming at what music really pulls at us, which is that emotional draw, that feeling, that frisson that goes up the back of your spine and into your head, that you feel that music moving inside you. And that, I think, really demands more than just musical structure, but texture and feeling and place and time in ways that make us feel that it actually matters, or that it actually represents a train of thought or a sense of place and time. I think in a way, what's drawn me personally the most to music like yours, Blake, sort of hybrid, symphonic, electronic, atmospheric. I don't know what it.
Yeah, modern classical.
Modern
I think, is
classical,
probably the biggest
yeah.
blanket term for it.
Which
Yeah.
sounds to me, I mean, like, when is modern? Because I thought that was what was described to like the music in the 30s. And some
Yeah,
of the
that was
classics, like,
modern for its time, and then
yeah,
it's
or
a
like the
constant
40s and
evolving
50s,
modern.
like, yeah, like John Cage or whatever. Like,
Yeah,
what it is now is a fusion of all of the technologies that we have, and are now more than I think in art in the past. We are in touch with our emotional and sort of more spiritual, but in that raw sense, not in the liturgical sense, in that non-strict, non-formal religious sense, that pure spiritual and emotional kind of connection to music and art that people now have, that I think in the past was sort of taboo in a weird way. And I think it can be new, like modern classical fuses all of that, the synthesizers, all the things that really are only important because they speak to an aesthetic, a feeling that goes beyond just musical, and gets more into personal,
Yeah.
and gives people that thing that they can latch onto, that the part that allows them to see a mirror of themselves in it, to relate to the music in the moment that they're hearing it, more than other kinds of music have a very limited way that you can personally interface with them when you're listening to it, if you know what I mean. If
Yeah.
it's too to form, like say old 1950s doo-wop, like you kind of have to be thinking doo-wop, feeling doo-wop. That's, I mean, you can use it ironically in a movie, like say over a war movie, like doing a low strafing run and listening to doo-wop music, because it establishes either an aesthetic of I don't care, we're just having fun, or this is a film about war in the 50s and 60s. Like it could be those two things, but at the same time, there's something more organic about modern orchestral that kind of fits way more mood space. You can be in almost any mood to a degree, except the kind of, oh, I don't know. My wife doesn't like driving to it because she kind of gets a little sleepy. But me, I mean, I think it's invigorating.
Yeah, it's very flexible, I think, because you have a lot of people, I think, who listen to music like I create in the background strictly, which I guess in a way is always been what classical music, Mozart's writing for rich people to, have this
party and
music to
and hang
dance
out.
in the
Yeah,
background or whatever. So it's not always in concert format. But I think maybe what's different now is that because there is so much music in it and it is becomes so specific, you have so many artists doing something that basically only they do. I think you can have these sort of hyper fans is not the right word, but there's a very particular set of people who like just really resonate with what you're creating and only what you're creating, or only in a way that you could create it. And I think that may be different from in the past. So you have this range of people, some who maybe aren't even really actively listening, they just have it on in the background, all the way up the spectrum to someone who's like, I can't believe this music was written. This is exactly the type of thing that I didn't realize I needed in my life,
Yeah.
to feel a certain way, or I didn't know this existed until I heard the song. And so I think that is a different moment that we're in now, whether that's, just through technology or access, or, just the sheer number of songs that are released every day. But yeah, Mike, I think you're right. Like I think there's an authenticity, maybe that's the word, that music has now that maybe it hasn't always had, or has had more sporadically.
I think in a way it's because music has become so pervasive. Independent music, I mean, it's like because there are probably a million songs released a day now in some form. I mean, obviously of all different qualities, from just like really simple, just amateurs to pros. But say there's probably a million songs released every day. In a way, it's terrifying if you're a musician in that, oh, well, how will I cut through the noise? But at the same time, there are billions of people who are now consumers of music, who are seeking their own way toward what resonates with them. And so there is an audience for you and you can reach them now. And so it's like really the goal is to really shape your sound and what you're trying to express. And that's an emotional, personal thing. That's not, I mean, musicians often still do kind of mimic things that they've heard. That's just human nature. But at the same time, in order to find an audience, they often need to craft a distinct way of expressing what they're doing so that it doesn't just sound like a copycat, because people do, they only have so many hours in the day. They're not going to listen to literal mirror images of the same music. I mean, so I think that gives this opportunity to composers to be more unique, strike out on their own, and be more personal, because it's not so rigid now. It's a whole cloud of audience and a whole cloud of composers. And I mean, I use composer loosely. That can literally just be somebody with a copy of FL Studio and just themselves, and like whatever, synths come stock with it. Like, they don't buy a single other thing in their life. They can still do so much musically that, before just a few years ago wasn't just not simply possible. So it's like it's definitely a strange time we're in, but it allows for these brilliantly mixed forms of music, because we all have grown up now listening to all kinds of genres as musicians. I think I don't know any musician that doesn't have just a whole bunch of different genres they're into, and also has a very difficult time expressing what it is that they would consider themselves as far as genre wise. Like,
Yeah.
well, it's sort of depends, right, on what I'm doing. So people are using all kinds of different instruments, using all that to create, either songs that mix genres together, with the perfectly, like the iconic example being, hip hop and symphonic, or hip hop and literally anything else, where you have a break beat and a strong bass line underpinning a smooth, sweeping like melody line. That kind of fusion of forms, and all different kinds on top of that. Like say you have like Balkan music, folk music merged on top of like symphonic music, or rock, or anything. Like think of all these different, like it's like a band like Devotchka or something like that, where you can just like smash together different genres freely, and you'll find an audience who just was looking for, like you said, just that perfect, what they didn't know they wanted,
Yeah.
and it's right there, and it just hits the spot
It's like,
musically.
if you build it, they will come,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that has to happen naturally though within the artist, because if you set out to do that, it usually doesn't work. Like today I'm going to write a hip hop track with rock elements, like it's got to be innate, I think, to the
Like a
producer.
genuine like want to create that thing. And
Yeah, or it
yeah.
just happens. I think
Yeah.
that with me, at least, that's the way it works. It's just, I get to the end of the song and a lot of times I'm like, I don't know how I got here, but I like it,
Yeah.
because there's just little magical moments happen as you're going through the process. And I think I'm not saying you can't set out with a goal and it work, but for me at least, I feel like I kind of need to go with the flow of wherever it's taking me, and that includes my history as a listener.
Yeah, because I think that's the thing about music is like, if as long as there's like a genuine want to create something, not just, oh, I'm going to try to do this because this is kind of like what I think is going to sell a million records.
Yeah.
But like anyone, like even like, Billie Eilish, her and her brother just sat in a bedroom and just made this record just because they wanted to do it. They had genuine interest. He was interested in audio production and she was a singer, and they collaborated, and look what it did, but they didn't probably set off to maybe do anything. It just kind of, that's just the way it happened. And I think as long as there's a genuine want to create something and not just do it for the sake of getting a hit. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people that get hits because they're trying to get hits, there's that too. But
a fine line there, where you want to be authentic and you also want to reach, the most amount of people you can, for various reasons, for whatever it is, you want to be famous or you want to be rich or whatever, whatever
Yeah.
the motivation for you is. But, there is always a line there where you have to kind of figure out the balance between making something that is real, to you and that you feel like other people can relate to, but also making something that somewhat relatable on a human level, or at least that's kind of always been my goal, is to write music that people can find comfort in, or find, something relatable about the feelings in it, is something in them that they can, sort of sync up to.
So speaking of relatableness, you did a film called We Don't Deserve Dogs.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk to you about how you get your music to feel so immersive. It's very wide stereo. You can hear things kind of going on in both ears, and it really brings you into the movie. I watched the trailer on their site, and it was fun. I'm not a dog person, but I still liked it. And
how dare you?
Oh yeah, sorry, so sorry. But do you have any like hacks, tips, things that you do to create a very wide, interesting mix?
Well, first off, that movie was, you should, if you are a dog person, I feel like you should definitely watch it. It's a very rare documentary in that there's no commentary, there's no narration. It's just strictly a global trek about the very special relationship that humans have with these animals that basically evolved from wild animals, and how today, what that looks like. And the filmmakers literally went to, I want to say, 12 countries, and there are vignettes from each country about the special relationships between human and dog in those places. And it's not always sweet, sometimes there are things that are troubling. But yeah, I don't know, tips and tricks. I try to balance things in a pan method, like left to right, have everything have its own space. I tend to, I don't know if these are tips and tricks or just common knowledge, but I tend to put most lower frequencies right down the middle. So usually that means that I will, on the master bus, put a mid-side EQ where, pretty much the sides are cut, depending on the material, maybe 80 to 120 hertz, so that most of that signal is coming straight up the middle. And in the similar vein, a lot of times I'll put a little bit of a high pass shelf, or not a high pass shelf, but a high shelf on the sides only.
Okay.
Give them maybe a little sparkle or something.
Mhm.
I don't feel like I do anything, extreme.
Do you compose different parts for each side? Like, are you panning? Like, for instance, I heard like some violins or strings that were doing different things on the left than on the right. Or like, do you double? Is there a go-to reverb that you use?
As far as strings go, normally I will place them as if they were in front of me, in a live scenario. So
Okay.
left to right, first violins to bass. That isn't always the case. Like with this film, there weren't a lot of strings other than cello. There are a few moments where I brought in more of a full string sound, but it was very intimate. And I hired a cellist to play a lot of the melodic parts. And but when, a lot of times there would be more than one cello part at the same time. So in that scenario, I basically treated the cello as a string quartet, and spread them out in different parts of the left and right spectrum. But generally speaking, it would be sort of a more traditional violins on the far left, basses on the far right, or, on the right somewhere.
Sure.
But it's all situational. Sometimes I do I guess maybe this is what you're asking, like double tracking something. Is that what you mean? Like where you have the same information? I think that's a useful technique, to record something twice as closely as you can, but there's a little difference there. I mean, I don't think that's a new technique by any stretch of the imagination. And then pan them opposite. There's a certain special sauce to that gives it, I guess, that sort of slightly out of phase relationship gives it some width and depth that you can't get, just by duplicating the sound and just panning them.
Yeah, is just having that kind of like putting a doubler effect on it. It's like, yeah, you can kind of mimic it maybe with some plugins, but there's something about just double tracking and just hard panning left and right that just will automatically kind of start to broaden the sound out.
Because the plugins, I mean, they can add the sort of phase relationship, but they can't add the inconsistency of the actual playing or the actual singing or whatever.
The humanity.
The human element to it, I think, is really what gives it that life. I wonder if that, because like evolutionarily speaking, maybe we gravitate towards hearing, or we're maybe mentally we're used to hearing multiple people singing the same chant, but it's never going to be in sync. And when you have 3, 4, 10 people, there's always going to be inconsistency between those individuals. So maybe it's hardwired to like that or to get something from that.
It's that uncanny valley. It's when we hear if it's too similar, every time we hear it, our brain can't process why it just sounds wrong. I mean, I think it just seems it's probably somehow evolutionarily. I don't know what would that be from. It just our brains know it's fake somehow. I think that's what's driven. Like that's why I think the sample libraries in the 90s were not. People just obviously knew they weren't good enough of just one sample of everything kind of thing. You need to like the idea is it's got to be nuanced. It's because musical expression is nuanced. It's the nuance that actually allows it to be that. I mean, it's I guess a way you could describe it would be in the way we record, with bit quantization, say 24-bit or versus 32-bit, things like that. You get a lot more detail, a lot more dynamic range to express sound. Well, I mean, with music, in a way, the ability to play in a more nuanced way, I think really is what's necessary to convince the ear that it's having an emotional experience through that. I mean, even with electronic music, even with synthesizers, it's still not like the best of it is never like that gridded out quantized stuff. I mean, even if it's something like Kraftwerk, they're still adding a lot of sort of like humanity to their playing style. I mean, they would still play it live.
That's why people are drawn to analog synth too, because there's something imperfect about the oscillators there. Like it's just a feeling that maybe you can't explain, but you also can't really replicate digitally.
Yeah, when something's too clean.
Or just too rigid. It's not expressive either dynamically or temporally, in terms of how we lead or lag behind the beat. And to even just say that is trivializing what it is to physically play along to a tempo where you're the one playing it and you're just micro delays here and there, ways you play slightly differently, whatever instrument you're playing. I mean, it's as articulate as speaking once you're reasonably practiced. And when it comes to singing, most people can at least express their emotions singing. So I think that's what it is. It's like language to us. It'd be like a robot voice. We know a robot voice when we hear it. If it's too rigid, it's too.
Yeah, there's beauty in the imperfections, I think.
If anything, that's the beauty we're chasing. That's the refined bit that we're drawn to. It's not even the rigid mathematical structure. It's the deviations from that in ways that are meaningful that we're drawn to in music, I think.
So yanking us back here, Blake. Back to We Don't Deserve Dogs. How did you get this gig?
Well, the filmmakers reached out to me. They had done another documentary a few years before that, and the composer they worked with on that one apparently had another engagement and couldn't do this movie. So they just started, I guess, listening to Spotify, trying to find someone they related to.
Nice.
And yeah, they emailed me and said, hey, we like what you're doing. Here's what we're doing. Are you interested? And so the process was basically, I watched the film through a couple of times just to kind of see if it's something that, I thought I could add to.
Mm-hmm.
For me, a requirement. I don't want to take away from someone else's work. And, they had temped it. And so I was like, okay, well, are you married to this style? And I think I mocked up like, a couple of different little 1 minute long scenes of the movie just to show them what my idea would be for it. And we were kind of on the same page and they liked it. So we just kind of went from there. So yeah, it just it was, just fell in my lap, basically. They were a dream to work with. I mean, they had their ideas about what they wanted, but they were very much in the dream world for a composer of saying, we want you to do what you do, which is sometimes rare.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did they mention how they found your work or found you?
I want to say they were listening on Spotify, I think. I mean, it's been a couple of years now since we had that first conversation. So I don't remember exactly, but I think it was something like that. They just, I don't know how they stumbled across my music, but I mean, I think that's where it started.
That's cool.
They were auditioning maybe people that wrote in a certain style, and they were doing it sort of blindly, just letting tracks play. And then, like they would say, I like that one. I like that one. And they kind of kept coming back around to songs that I had written. And so I guess there was something about my music that resonated with them or what they thought, the movie could use.
Yeah, that's cool. Because I've heard of that same kind of thing with artists like Mimi Page, because she does a lot of her own music and puts it on Spotify. And she would just get hit up by people. Hey, I'm working on this movie and I just heard your music and I loved it. And I think it would be great. So it's like, I think it's cool to hear sort of like how, like when you get those kind of like cold emails.
Yeah, I get a lot of times it's through Musicbed, which is who I do all the sync licensing with. And so filmmakers who have, maybe had smaller projects and had, maybe used my music for those or something. And now they want to take on something a bit more, larger in scale, might reach out and say, hey, I'm a fan of your music. We've used it a lot in, X, Y, and Z. Would you be interested in writing something custom for us? So a lot of times that happens. But yeah, this movie was more random than that, because as far as I know, they had never heard of me before.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about Musicbed. So I checked out your name and you have hundreds of tracks on there.
Yep.
And have you found a lot of success through Musicbed? And would you recommend doing library music and licensing music that way to new composers?
Musicbed is a rare animal because they are very, very selective. I want to say the last time I talked to them, they were only onboarding like less than 0.1% of all submissions.
Wow.
They don't look at themselves as necessarily a library, I don't think, in the traditional sense of like, a royalty-free type thing.
Audio jungle kind of deal.
They look at themselves as representing artists, who are creating, I hate to use the word real music, but like music that's not meant just for production purposes.
Sure. Not just totally stock.
Yeah. And marrying those artists with people who need that relevant music. So, yeah, I mean, obviously I feel like, if you feel like you're on a level that you could get into that specifically with them, I mean, it is very beneficial. I mean, it's been life-changing for me as far as just financially.
Nice.
But if you're talking just a general music production libraries, I don't know. I mean, I don't really have experience in most of those, so it's hard for me to say. My general sense is that, if you're good at cranking out music of a certain genre or things that might work in a royalty-free situation, then I do think there's money to be made there if that's, your goal. I don't know that it would be necessarily fulfilling as an artist, though.
Sure.
So you'd have to kind of, I guess, weigh what your priorities are in that. But yeah, I've been very fortunate. I got in with Musicbed at the right time, and it was a good fit. They're very much about, you be you. Don't write toward an ideal, production or
They'll
spec.
send you briefs or nothing like that. It's just like,
No.
all right, here you go.
It's not a template. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, so they want the, we talked about, you know, authenticity earlier. That's what they want. They want people who are doing their own thing, but you know, that they feel like could reach a market with the, you know, visual media. So yeah, I mean, sometimes I'll write music that, you know, it's tricky as an artist now. You kind of have to be a brand in a way, and sometimes I'll write some music that I'm like, this is, I feel like marketable from a, you know, like I could see people wanting to use this in a production of some sort of visual media production, but I don't necessarily think that it would be, you know, the next thing in line maybe that should live on my Spotify page, you know, or my Apple Music page. For the people that might, you know, be fans on there, that it might be a little bit too disjointed from, you know, maybe the average there. And so sometimes I'll create something that ends up in that zone, and I'll still send that off to them to be licensed, but it won't necessarily make it onto, you know, the more general public sites. But it wasn't like, you know, my intention to do that. It wasn't that I set out to write a production library necessarily or something in a specific genre. It just kind of ended up there.
Sure. So, what advice would you give up and coming composers who want to get into composing for media, like people using Sonespheres 4, for example? What advice would you give them as far as growing an audience and growing a network of gigs?
To the extent that you can build, you know, relationships with other people that are making that type of media, I think that that's always beneficial. If you're like brand new, just starting out, then I say, you know, say yes to everything you're offered,
Yeah.
because there's always something to learn. Like even if you fail at it miserably, you know, you'll learn what not to do. It gets more complicated, you know, the more you are in it, you know, because the opportunities are slimmer. And you know, as we were talking about earlier, there's just so much music now.
Mhm.
To stand out is, it's just, I mean, it's almost luck. I mean, I know no one wants to hear that, but it's I guess my advice would be to, if you're just starting, build a foundation of skill and knowledge and inspiration from just all sources that you can find, and you know, work on the craft as much as you can, whether that's just for yourself and practice, or you know, with others who are just starting out maybe on the visual side, and you know, who are sort of learning their craft as well. I think that's a good partnership to have when you're first starting.
Yeah, totally.
I wish there were more like magic bullet answer, but if it were easy, everyone would do it. You know, that's
Right. Well, and
that's
there's nothing wrong with it being a hobby, like music being a hobby or a part-time job. Like in, you know, in the olden days, music was something you did at church or you did with your friends after work.
yeah. I think a lot of people maybe forget that. You know, you don't. It doesn't have to be a career. You know, it can be something that you enjoy, and I think we try to monetize our hobbies too much now. You know, like and maybe there's this sort of false sense of success, you know, with people that see these YouTubers and everyone, you know,
Live streaming, playing video games.
yeah, content, you know, quote unquote content creators, you know, making all this money, but you know, not everyone can do that. And if everyone is doing it, then you know, there's just no one's going to make a living at it. You know, there's only so many people to watch. If everyone's making the content, there's no one left to watch it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it's also like easy to forget that for a long time, a big part of our cultural ethos were things like punk music and other counterculture forms of art, where the idea wasn't that it be commercially huge, but that it express a purpose and a point of view that was a personal one. And I think that that's really the commodification of music. I think the one, it's like it could go both ways. You know, either it becomes so ubiquitous that we all feel free to make it. There's no pressure. It's just there for everybody like air. Or it becomes monolithic and sort of more extreme in its sort of hierarchical structure. I don't know. I feel like it's up to people to see music as some way of expressing themselves
Yeah.
and not feel like they need to get lost in it.
Yeah, I think, you know, with any art form, I feel like if your motivation to get into it or to start doing it is to make money, then you probably have failed right out of the gate.
Yeah.
And that's hard to maybe sometimes accept, you know, like if you're like, well, I really want to be a film composer, but you know, I can't really do that and work, you know, like a 60-hour-a-week job. Like that's a tough thing, you know, and a lot of people have been there. I just feel like the most successful people, that authenticity comes through, you know, like if you're in it for money, you're found out pretty quickly. Like, you know, like your music just lacks something for, you know, like that maybe the other guys doesn't, who's in it for the art of it. And I think the money will follow, you know, the art. If you're in it for the right reason and you get better and better at your craft, I think if you're patient enough, then, you know, it will come around financially.
That's the key word right there, is patience.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. I think what it is, that if you're purely in it for the money, you'll leave out something. You won't put it all on the table. You'll keep some of yourself back out of, I think, perhaps fear of being either vulnerable. I feel like there have been, say, for example, pop stars or rock stars that had very commercial beginnings, you know, that became huge on a big commercial sound, but in their later years, sort of as they drifted into obscurity, they became more experimental because they, you know, they could at that point. There was, you know, they were no longer chasing the dragon of fame, it seemed. They were more just chasing their own internal dragon.
Yeah.
Or it could be an example of where, you know, where there was evolution musically, I'm talking about. There could be other examples where the evolution musically could have just been purely because media found a band, loved what they were doing, and the band just evolved on its own, ignoring the attention, and that's how they would have wound up, and media moved on. Like, I don't know, how do you examine a band like Pearl Jam, for example? Huge, one of the biggest bands in the world for a minute, yet to this day continues to make music, and very different from their early music, and just, but seems to like, I mean, it's pretty clear they probably go on like the Grateful Dead, in that they will just continue until they retire or pass on, because they enjoy what they're doing musically. It seems it's not just a, I guess, a job, you could say, for them.
Yeah, I always think of Radiohead. Like I feel
Yeah.
like you know, they could have become the next U2, you know, but instead they released Kid A. You know, like that's just I really admire people and bands that are willing to really push the genre they're in, or just ignore genre and do whatever they want to do, you know, and hope that their fans
Experiment.
come with them.
Yeah, especially when you have a hit record, there's so much writing on, all right, this next album, is it going to be a hit? And then they just go the complete opposite way. Like, we're going to go even more experimental or weirder with
Yeah.
just that. Like, we're not doing it for them. And honestly, like, that's why whenever I see people talking about bands and they're like, oh, they should have did this on that album, or I really wish they didn't do it like that. Or it's like, you either like, you're playing it too safe, or then you try to do something that's like way too new, or just because you're genuinely like, this is where we want to go with our music. And then people are like giving you shit for it. And it's like, well, we're not writing it for you. Like, yeah, you're our fans, but at the end of the day, like, the fans should respect the artist, and like, I like them because they do their thing. If you start judging bands by all, you know, it's like all of a sudden everyone's like a reviewer. It's like, well, then listen to something else, you know, or listen to the old records. Like, I'm a big believer in just artists should just do their thing, whether it like loses fans or gains fans, whatever. Like, just, you need to have like a genuine want to do whatever you're doing, or else what's the point?
I also feel like, I mean, and of course, this is just my 2 cents, but I feel like an album should be a self-contained work of art to a degree, a coherent narrative of form. And a band might have a specific style, or an artist might have a specific style that they're really consistent with. But at the same time, the album really should tell a story that you can distinguish audibly from another album they've released. You know,
Yeah.
like, so when a band just recycles the same ideas over and over again, I think that you know, maybe it's to please fans and to capitalize on a winning formula financially, but at the same time, it won't really be remembered. You know, people just kind of eventually just forget what was on what album, whatever. Versus bands that really try to make a, you know, first achieve that work of art, but then move on, evolve to something new for the next one. I think those are the ones that stand the test of time, where people actually remember album names and consider them as their potential impact on society.
Yeah, and again, that to me, that comes back to that sort of the whole theory of that authenticity. You know, I keep coming back to that word. I just feel like that's really important. And Craig, you know, you mentioned a long time ago, I think right before Mike got on, about Sonespheres 4 being sort of your favorite of the group.
Mhm.
And I've heard from a few people privately about that as well. I think a lot of that comes from the recordings are very raw, like it's very out of the box. That was my goal with this particular volume, was to get out of the box. 1 through 3 were based, well, 1 and 2 especially were based almost entirely on pre-existing samples, which were, obviously beautifully recorded. And then 3, I think I maybe dabbled with getting out of the box a little bit, but 4 is entirely out of the box. So I think there's a humanity and an imperfection to it
Mhm.
that maybe touches on a lot of the things that we've been talking about here in the last, few minutes, about sort of that uncanny valley and the realism of the imperfection, and the humanity in the samples. I think that even if you don't realize it, I think that that's what a lot of people are relating to when they're playing through these instruments, and finding a connection there maybe they didn't have with some of the older ones.
Yeah, like there's really just like, because like from the like felted pianos, it's like everyone loves a nice felted piano sound.
Sure.
It's just an automatic, like, kind of cinematic, getting the inspiration going. Yeah, but then like a lot of the string sounds, just there's something about, when you hear like a bow, like, okay, if you listen to like orchestral music, they could just bow very constant over and over. But when you hear like those bows where like it kind of starts to, lighten up a little bit or get a little squeaky, or just has this kind of like, I don't know what it is. It's very hard to explain, but it's just like I found that so many of the sounds, from like the guitar to the strings to the pianos, even the
Yeah.
vocals, where it just really starts to conjure up, like when you're writing music and you have a single instrument that you're playing, and then as you're playing it, there's like this like little thing in your head where you can start to like overlay it, like another instrument or sound or a melody. You start kind of, oh, I can start to hear this on top of that. And I feel like so many of those sounds just like generate those ideas. And like when I was doing the walkthrough for that, like it ran a little bit longer, but it's just because as I'm, playing through some of the sounds, I just kind of was like wanting to experiment. I almost wanted to shut the camera off and just start recording,
Yeah.
like writing some music or something, because like those sounds are just, they're so inspiring, and yeah, just beautiful work on that.
I love hearing that. I'm glad that it's resonating, because as I'm recording these samples, the way I work on it is like, after every time I manipulate a sample, I will sort of make my own little impromptu contact instrument with it, just to play it and see if it works. Like, does it give me some feeling? Because that's ultimately the only things that make it into these libraries are, things that I feel on an emotional level when I press the keys, playing those samples, or is it something I would use in my own productions?
Yeah.
And yeah, I really got, some goosebumps with this one throughout the whole process. And
Yeah.
a lot of the imperfections you're talking about, which really is what it is. When you mentioned the string instruments, and it's just because I don't know how to play cello, and it's me bowing a cello, and there's if I'm trying to play a Bach cello concerto, it's not going to work. But
Right.
if it's me playing a sample, it's not so bad, because that imperfection can give life to, when spread across, the other keys and in your own music. It's
Mhm.
not so bad. And it does give that humanity. So it was a fun experiment to go through a lot of these instruments where I'm not really, even halfway competent at playing them, but there's just a magic in that when you
Yeah.
when you play them as samples.
Yeah.
Beginner's luck.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have a favorite synthesizer right now?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Like all the Junos are sort of all the rage right now. I'm really interested in maybe getting the new, well, it's not new, but new to me, the sequential, the Oberheim, I think it's the OB6.
Mm-hmm.
Something really magical about that I think I could use. So I think that might be my next one.
What are the synthesizers that you used for the Sonespheres for the synth aspects
Or
of the
if
library?
it's a secret recipe, you don't have to tell us. It's okay.
No, it's all the Juno based stuff. That's
Oh, okay.
sort of.
Did you run it through pedal boards or VST chains? Like what was going on back there?
Yeah, almost all the effects chains for the samples on this one, with the exception of a few reverbs, were all done through pedals.
Cool.
Yeah. I've been curating a nice little pedal board over the past couple of years, and I don't feel like I've perfected it quite yet, but I'm getting really close to what I think of as my ideal sound.
Nice.
You've always had a knack for working guitar into your compositions. It's just fascinating to follow the route, like as a producer, as you're choosing the effects you want to use. I mean, that's a very personal thing for everybody in music, who's when they're creating what they're finding what works for them. Guitarists are often the ones that become kind of like focused on the ideal pedal board.
Yeah.
I know early for me that was like a big thread that I kept pulling, because there was just so many possibilities. But it's interesting to see that you use that in context of production with, like, outside the guitar.
I mean, I think that it's pretty common now to do that. So I don't think I'm
Yeah.
breaking any new ground, but I really enjoy unusual effects on, instruments you wouldn't necessarily expect them on.
Yeah. Well, I just mean, in a way, it's more challenging than, say, the convenience of like plugins, if you will. Like you're
Oh,
essentially choosing to route audio out,
yes.
or in between, the microphone and the recorder. It's sort of like you're committing, in the way that analog tape, for example, sort of used to represent. You're committing what you're doing in an inalterable way. Well, it's alterable, but you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
normally when with sampling, we're going straight from the mic right into the recorder through the best, cleanest preamps we can, using the mics that have the absolute lowest noise and highest dynamic range, and we're really trying to get no filter, really trying to sort of represent the purest form along whatever sort of goal we're after, unless it's something with a direct in or something. But where in something that's meant to be more emotional, like the Sonespheres 4, you're going right from the goal, right from the start for that goal of like a shaped and presented point of view musically. And so it's using things that are destructive, like unbalanced signal chains and like guitar pedals and stuff.
Yeah, and you and I talked at sort of at the beginning of this whole process of creating Sonespheres about how, in a way, we wanted it to represent what I was doing at the time as an artist, musically. And I think that that's just what I do. I like that direct interface into something real and physical, and more I feel that way. I didn't, a lot of artists came up in an analog age where they, were used to twisting knobs and having all these outboard gear. And that's never been me, but like, I'm really sort of starting to gravitate toward that. I think, in a way, I have started to think of myself less as a composer and more as an artist. And I think part of that is just getting outside of the computer and actually playing music versus, looping it or writing it bit by bit, like to sit down at a piano and actually play through a song, I think is a different experience than to go note by note in a DAW, for example. And Mike, that's a good point about guitarists and their pedal boards. And I wonder, I've never really thought about it like this, but are there any other instruments where you really are interfacing directly with effects, like on a day-to-day basis, like I think that may be a
I mean, there you can. I'd say number 2 in line would be like synth players, where they use a lot of outboard gear. Vocalists, I mean, there's a tradition of using effects, right? Kind of early on, or different kinds of microphones. Mike Patton is a good example, where use 2 mics taped together or something like that, or I mean, there's tons of others.
but I think guitarists have a special relationship with that, that.
It's very
there's like
tied
a
in
whole
with
universe of
guitarists.
products just for them that sort of caters to that way of thinking.
Yeah, well, and because without those effects, they don't really have their sound, and like that's the part of the fingerprint of their, instrument.
Yeah.
If they're thinking in those terms. So
Yeah, and technologically, there's a structure that, if you look at it, like, so the guitar has an unbalanced. Well, I mean, essentially, it's just like a really basic either piezo or
Humbucker.
electromagnet, like, and it's noisy, it's buzzy, almost, but like it's necessary with the sound of a guitar. Even with a humbucker pickup, like it's still it's very a very different kind of sound than, say, something that a microphone will hear. It's a very different kind of sound, even than like a contact mic or something like that. And the signal path that it has is, by definition, an unbalanced kind of like linear mono path. I mean, obviously there's stereo guitars and other things like that, but like for the most part, I mean, like the bulk of what the guitar users are working with, it's kind of like geared toward pedal boards and like a sequential, you know, um, sequence of effects that shape one finished sound on the output stage, and that with tons of different ways you can mess with in the middle.
Yeah.
I don't know why, to me it's interesting, because in most other instruments, even with vocalists, you might use a couple of effects, but it's rare to go as nuts with it as guitarists can and love to go on one sort of input source. I don't know why I'm weird like that. I geek out on like the hidden technical sort of like landscape of music and how it really shapes how it ends up coming together and forms the archetypes in music that we've come to know and love.
Mm.
See, and I like the idea of other acoustic organic instrument sources being fed through that same signal chain. I think there's a real beauty in that, like something like a transparent overdrive on strings or a piano even. I don't know. There's personally, there's just something about that I connect to. And I think, pedals are an easy way to get there because like you said, they're kind of made for that from the beginning. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's a great thing to take advantage of, from a production standpoint. Try it on everything. That's one of the beautiful things about pedals is they're not that expensive,
Mhm.
and you can, to go back to our chef analogy, you can play around with all these different spices that you've never, experienced before.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking of that same thing because Misha from Periphery, I've seen videos of them as they're making music, and that's what he would call it, spice racking. He would have like this wall of pedals. He's like, all right, so for this, we're gonna spice rack it, and pick a pedal, for specific sounds and stuff like that. And so that's a perfect analogy. But real quick, I wanted to ask, what are some of your favorite pedals that you like to use? What are the ones that lately you've been using a lot that are really working for you?
I love the Strymon Volante, which is as close to like a Space Echo as I think you can get without actually using tape. I really like that. There's the Shallow Water by Fairfield Circuitry is a instant vibe. I mean, it's basically like you're running your signal through a cassette tape. I've just got the hologram microcosm, which is like a little computer in a pedal box. I mean, it's amazing. It's like a granular synthesis pedal.
Oh wow.
That just anything you put through it is magical. So that you'll hear a lot of that one on my next album.
Nice.
Guarantee you that. I guess those right now would probably be the ones that I'm like most excited about.
That's
I bought
cool.
some. I bought like everything that's mono. I buy two of just so I can have a proper stereo chain.
Yes.
And I just bought some Klon clones, which are just everything I put through it. I love. So I love distortion on things you wouldn't necessarily expect to find it on.
So you didn't
Yeah.
want to buy the original one for like $15
No, I think
or whatever it is?
$7,000 a piece. And probably have to do work on them. I think I'll pass.
Yeah.
So where do you find a lot of the unusual pedals? Do they get stocked in major retailers like Guitar Center, or are they? Is there like a sort of like an underground community?
I mean, like I feel like, and I don't like historically, I don't know if this is true, but I feel like just from the general consensus around like YouTube reviews and stuff, they were kind of in a golden age of pedal making. It's almost like craft beer, like there's just so many independent companies that are, like hand making these things all over the world.
How do you find them?
Through YouTube, a lot of times, there's these sort of channels that's all they do, or like reviews of pedals, and they'll just play, like not even talk about them. They'll just have them on the screen and play through, synths or guitarists going through these pedals, and you just kind of get a sense for what it might sound like. Word of mouth, is another. And like the Strymon stuff is everywhere. I mean, you can buy that pretty much anywhere. The Fairfield circuitry one that I mentioned is probably a bit more hard to find. I mean, you could always go directly to their website and buy it. The microcosm is only sold through the maker. Like you have to order it directly from them. They only make like a batch at a time every month, so you kind of have to pre-order it a few months in advance.
I would think, I mean, for weird microphones and instruments, I'll explore Etsy and things like that.
Yeah.
Just weird stuff. Because a lot of times, like, people will have similar tastes or problems. Like, so like, hey, or this microphone or this accessory, like, or this pedal does this weird one thing that I really like, and somebody's made it just to do that one thing. So I think that's, like you said, it seems like we're in a bit of a golden age as far as options and
Yeah.
E-commerce. So Blake, we've kept you a while. I have a few rapid fire questions for you, and then we can close this out. The first rapid fire question is a best recent purchase under $100.
Well, the Klon clones were under 100. I don't
Nice.
know how that was, but
Which one did you get?
I mean, I don't even think it has like a brand name on it.
Okay.
I think basically some little factory in China, that's all they make, maybe.
They're just knocking them off. Yeah. That's cool. Okay, next one is hobbies, interests outside of music. Can be anything.
Lego. I love Lego.
Interesting.
Nice.
I have a 7-year-old son, and it's been fun to kind of go back and get into that again, because I was really into it as a kid, and then as you grow up, you kind of lose touch with some of those things, but it's been fun to get back into that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, favorite YouTube channel, podcast, or TV show at the moment?
Podcasts. I like things dealing with history, so like Hardcore History is a good one.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, just general news type podcast I listen to. I was really into true crime stuff like during the lockdown phase, but I've kind of gotten out of that, I think.
I still am. Me and my girlfriend watch this stuff all the time.
Yeah, TV shows. I'm currently watching The White Lotus. I don't know if I'm obsessed with it, but that's the one I'm currently watching.
Okay. Yeah. And then the last question I have for you is, what is next for you? Any goals or plans for 2022 that you're excited about?
My next project is an album.
Okay.
And I have started it loosely. I will say I have started it. I'm in what I like to call pre-production, which is where I'm kind of coming up with what I think will be the palette of sounds that I want to use, and working on melodies that I think will make it into the final product. And as far as goals, I think the main one kind of touched on already, and that's, I think, to become more of an artist, like in the fact that I'm divorcing myself from the more digital aspect of creating music and trying to get back into the love of the actual playing it in real time. And I think that's a goal for me this year, is to kind of maybe get back to more of those roots than I've had over the past decade or so.
That's beautiful.
I have a question for you that I'd like to ask. What is something that you think you would be doing if music wasn't your profession?
Probably something really menial, like I was a paralegal for 6 years before this current career took off, and I toyed with the idea of going to law school. I took the LSAT.
Oh wow.
And but I didn't. I hated it. Like when I took the job as a paralegal to kind of see, okay, well, is this a career that I want, in the legal field? And I mean, I'm glad I did it, because I learned a lot. And now, like anytime I get a contract, I know how to read it.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that's important, as a business. But, I just like dreaded going to work every day, and so I don't know. I would like to think I would be an entrepreneur of some sort, but I specifically what I would be doing, I don't know. I think I probably would not be very happy doing it, though, because this, I think, is what if there is such a thing as being meant to do something, I think this is as close as I can get.
Yeah, I fully believe that everyone's meant to do something, and if you're unhappy, then that's the most surefire way to know that you're either not on the right track, or you're at least, having to do what you need to do to get to that. So, I think what you're doing now is definitely what you were meant to be doing. So
Yeah, and and I think a lot of times people think of their dream job as something that every day will be magical. But I mean, there are days that I don't want to do this. Like going back to the film score. Writing 80 plus minutes of music in a few weeks and having to do the mixing and mastering and writing and recording it. It becomes tiresome like any other job. But at the end of the day, I'd rather be doing this than anything else.
Totally.
Yeah, you got to enjoy the doing. It's not about the outcome, and finding what you were meant to do is more about finding what clicks when you're doing it, forgetting about what's at the end.
Yeah, you realize, that every moment could be a good moment or a bad moment, but over the long arc of time, you're doing something that on the whole makes you feel more positive and less dread about doing it than something else would.
Yeah, I mean, and there are purely physical jobs that also meet that for a lot of people. Myself included at points in my life where there are some kinds of things that it's making music is a craft in the way that if it's really right for you, that fixing or building a car is a craft. It can have that same internal poetry happening at the same time, depending on what you do. I mean, it's like, I guess a simpler way of putting it, if you almost drop into the zone, if you get into the zone when you're doing your job and you lose track of time and you just feel it kind of fill you up in what you're doing, at the very least you're tapping into that. And that could be, I think that's really what it's all about. You feel it
Yeah.
when you're doing something that is right for you.
Yes, if you have days, which I've had many of these days, where you start something and then you realize 12 hours later you haven't eaten,
Yeah.
and you just really have completely lost all concept of time and or your surroundings. And I think you're probably on the right track. And I do think there's something about music. Nathan, you asked about hobbies. I forgot, like one of the things I love to do is woodworking. And
Okay.
and I think there's something about that, like the idea of you're taking individual components and building something with them, and that maybe that even ties into the Lego hobby. I think there's something related to music, in music like that, where you're taking these disparate ideas or sounds and then merging them into something that's a more cohesive whole. I wonder if that's something inherent in a lot of musicians.
I think so. Just that innate will to create something can just somehow attach itself to other things, whether it's cooking or any sort of other skill where you're learning the fundamentals and putting stuff together. And it's just like once you kind of have that, it's very easy to apply that to other different fields. So if you're one of those people that you just like to broaden your horizons, you'll probably find all kinds of other hobbies that are very related.
Yeah, they use the same muscles in your brain, when you're working on different tasks, I guess.
Exactly.
And with the Lego thing, one of the guys I follow, he says if you make money and work with your mind, then you should find a way to rest with your hands. And so like that's, for me, that's like woodworking and just like doing any sort of craft where you're, using your hands, you're cutting things, that is like a way to relax and rest.
Interesting. Yeah, I could see that.
Well, I think that wraps it up here. Thanks so much for coming on, Blake. This was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It was fun to hang out with you guys and finally kind of meet you in person.